In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 NHL games happening on January 21st, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Detroit Red Wings versus Toronto Maple Leafs. Picture this chilly January night in Toronto. National TV cameras, that bright Scotiabank Arena ice, and Detroit skating in with a quiet little flex already in their pocket. 3 wins to 0 in the season series after taking 2 back in October and another one in late December. That is not a tiny thing. It means every time these two have lined up this season, the Wings have found an answer. On paper, the records tell the same story. Detroit is sitting at 30-16-4, parked near the top of the Atlantic and looking like a team that has finally figured out how to win in different ways. Toronto is at 24-17-8, which is solid, but they look more like a group still wrestling with its own identity. Great at home, a bit shaky once you start poking at the details. You do not even need fancy models for this. Anyone glancing at the standings for more than 5 seconds can see that the larger body of work tilts toward Detroit right now. Up front, the Wings lean on that first line of Dylan Larkin, Lucas Raymond, and Alex DeBrincat, and it is the kind of trio that gives coaches headaches on the other bench. They create, they finish, they can tilt a shift without doing anything flashy, and all 3 sit on Detroit's active roster with no injury tags hanging over them. It is one of those lines where you blink, you look up, and suddenly they have turned a harmless zone entry into a full minute of pressure. Behind them, John Gibson has calmed things down in goal. He leads the team in wins. He is one of the 2 goaltenders listed for this matchup on the big boards, and he is not carrying any injury designation. So you have a team that already knows it can beat Toronto, backed by a goalie who has been banking results, which is a pretty comforting combo if you are a Wings fan. The team-level numbers back up that feeling. Detroit is putting up 3.10 goals per game and giving up 3.02, so they are not just squeaking by, they are actually outscoring people over the long haul. The part that really jumps off the stat sheet, though, is special teams. Their power play is humming at 25.2%, while Toronto sits at 17.2%. The Wings draw a little more penalty time, too, so when this turns into a parade to the box, it often tilts toward their strengths. Toronto, for all of its issues, still scores in bunches. The Leafs come in averaging 3.37 goals per game, which is right near the top of the league, but they also allow 3.33 and give up about 31.5 shots a night. That is a recipe for wild games, and it is also a sign that their structure leaks more than the coaching staff would like to admit. And then there is the health gap. Toronto is the side carrying more red flags on the lineup sheet. William Nylander, their leading scorer this season and one of the engines of their offense, sits on injured reserve with a projected return just a couple of days away. He is joined on IR by Anthony Stolarz, Dakota Mermis, Chris Tanev, and Dakota Joshua. Austin Matthews, John Tavares, and Morgan Riley are all listed as healthy and ready to go, which keeps the star power intact, but that is still a lot of depth stripped out of a blue line and forward group that already leans hard on its top names. Detroit, by contrast, shows no players on the Major League-wide injury reports right now. A clean bill of health late in January is a small luxury, and it matters when the other side is patching holes with call-ups and line-up shuffles. If you zoom in on recent form, the picture does not suddenly swing toward Toronto either. The Leafs are coming off a 6-3 home loss to Minnesota that snapped a long run of home wins, the kind of result that reminds you how fragile momentum can feel. Detroit has gone 4-1 in its last 5 and already cracked the Leafs 3 separate times this season, which has to add a bit of quiet confidence in that visiting room. So what looks like a classic big market home favorite on the surface starts to feel a lot closer to a true coin flip once you layer in form, health, and matchups. The market, though, still leans toward the blue sweater. Toronto sits around minus 118 on the money line, while Detroit floats near even money or a tiny plus number depending on where you are shopping. When the side with the better record, the cleaner injury sheet, the more dangerous power play, and a 3-0 edge in this season's head-to-head is the one catching the plus sign, you can see why a lot of sharp eyes start drifting toward the road bench for value. As our first pick for this matchup, the Detroit Red Wings money line is our full game side pick. The number is set at 6.5, and honestly, that feels less like a brick wall and more like a suggestion scribbled in pencil. Toronto has basically turned into an overmagnet this year. They score those 3.37 goals per night, give up 3.33, and they allow almost 32 shots against per game. That cocktail is how you end up with scorelines like 6-5 and 6-3, the exact kind of games we have seen from them on this recent stretch, including that wild loss to Minnesota that ended their home streak. Detroit is not some slow, grinding spoiler either. The Wings are putting up 3.10 goals per game, and when they get a power play, they treat it like a chance to punish, not just pass the puck around. At 25.2% on the man advantage, they turn mistakes into goals often enough that opponents feel it on the bench. They also draw their share of penalties, so that power play actually shows up in the flow of most nights. It is not just a number living on paper. Put those scoring rates together and you land at roughly 6.47 combined goals per game on average. That is before you sprinkle in the national TV stage, some original six pride, and the simple fact that these two have already played 3 high-energy games where Detroit kept finding ways to score. The emotional temperature of games like this is usually a little higher, and when tempers get going, structure often loosens, which usually favors offense. The betting results line up with that story too. Maple Leafs games have gone over 6.5 in 29 of 49 tries this season, which is a lot of nights where the scoreboard pushed past this exact number. Red Wings games have cleared 6.5 in 23 of 50, so more often than not, they are living in that 7+ goal neighborhood as well. Two teams, both comfortable in track meet games, both already showing you they are willing to race instead of crawl. Stylistically, neither bench feels like it is trying to script a 2-1 chess match. Craig Berub's Leafs still lean into their offensive firepower even with Nylander out, and they trust that if things open up, their big guns can keep them in it. On the other side, Todd McClellan's Red Wings have grown pretty comfortable in those you score 4, we score 5 type of nights when the game demands it. They have the skill to trade chances, and they have done it enough that it no longer feels like an accident when a game turns into a sprint. Add in Toronto's blue line missing multiple regulars on injured reserve and Detroit rolling in with a fully healthy top 6, and it becomes pretty easy to picture both teams landing punches on the scoreboard. That is not a promise, of course, it is a projection built off current form, recent results, and the way both staffs seem happy to lean toward offense rather than slamming on the brakes. Given how these teams have played all season, and especially how often their games have drifted past this exact total already, it is honestly easier to imagine another 7-goal type of script than a tight, sleepy 3-2 finish. So if you are thinking about the total, this one feels more like you are deciding how comfortable you are riding along with the chaos than whether goals will show up at all. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Philadelphia Flyers versus Utah Mammoth. Under the lights in Salt Lake City, this matchup feels like one of those checkpoints in a season where both teams find out what they actually are rather than what they think they are. You have Philadelphia coming in at 23-17-8, finally snapping that ugly 6-game skid with that grindy 2-1 win in Vegas, and trying to prove it was more than a one-night escape. On the other side, Utah sit at 25-20-4, riding the kind of quiet surge that suddenly has everyone treating the Delta Center like a proper problem spot on the schedule. From the market's point of view, the story is pretty clear. Most books have Utah sitting in that -160 to -170 neighborhood on the money line, with Philadelphia in that +135 to +145 pocket and Utah also the favorite on the puck line. That is not a casual shade of favorite. It is the kind of pricing you see when the house respects the home ice, respects the current form, and does not totally trust the road dog's ability to repeat what it just did against a contender. Home and road splits back that up in a very straightforward way. Utah have built a real identity in this building at 14-7-2 on home ice, while the Flyers are sitting at 11-9-3 away from Philadelphia, which is fine, but it is not exactly the stuff that terrifies you if you are the home locker room. It is that subtle difference between capable on the road and built to go anywhere and steal points on demand. And right now Utah are the side that look more comfortable in their own skin in this specific spot. Recent form also tilts the emotional feel of the matchup. Utah are fresh off that 6-3 win over Seattle on the 17th, part of a stretch where they have been stacking wins at home, and the common thread in that run is how composed they look when they get a lead. They are getting quality goaltending from Karel Vejmelka, who is firmly on the active roster and, by every public report, ready to go again after handling that Kraken game without any new injury flags. You watch them in this building and the rhythm is pretty simple. They get one, they get two, they lean on structure, and the other team spends a lot of time chasing. Philadelphia's story is a little more stressful right now. They just snapped that 6-game losing streak in Vegas, which is huge, but it was also their second straight game giving up 30-plus shots and depending on a big effort from Samuel Ersson. Ersson is active, healthy, and expected to be in the mix again, but the safety net they leaned on earlier in the year, Dan Vladar, is on injured reserve, officially listed with a lower body issue and only eligible to come back later in this road trip. So the guy who leads them in wins and goals against average is not available tonight, and that matters more than usual when the road team is walking into altitude on the back half of a tough western swing. And that is before you even get to the blue line and support pieces. Rasmus Ristolainen is on injured reserve with an upper body injury, not traveling with the team for this trip. Rodrigo Abols is on injured reserve with a lower body injury. Tyson Forrester is also on injured reserve with an arm issue. All three are officially unavailable, which trims down the forward depth and the physical edge they like to bring behind their top skill. Bobby Brink is back and active, which helps, but this is still a Flyers group that is short a few regulars compared to the roster card you would have seen a month or two ago. Utah have their own injury list, and that cannot just be brushed aside. Logan Cooley is on injured reserve with that lower body injury that was given at least an 8-week timeline, and as of today, he is still officially out. Alexander Kerfoot is also on injured reserve with an upper body injury and is considered week to week. Both are confirmed as unavailable here. The key detail, though, is that Utah's recent surge has happened with those absences already baked in. They are not waiting on Cooley or Kerfoot to return to find their game. They have already found it without them. The forwards driving that success are very much present and cleared to play. Clayton Keller, Nick Schmaltz, Dylan Guenther, and Lawson Krause are all on the active roster, all expected to suit up, and they have dragged this offense to 153 goals through 49 games, which is just over 3.1 per night. That is not some theoretical upside. That is current season production. It is also not just they score a lot, it is the way they score. They play like a top-heavy band where the first line hogs the spotlight, but the supporting cast is smart enough to play to that, and the whole thing works much better at home when they get last change and can steer matchups a little. Philly are not bringing a harmless attack, and that has to be acknowledged if you are genuinely weighing the side. Trevor Zegras and Travis Konechny are both on the Flyers roster, healthy, and expected to be available, and together they lead the way on a team that has put up 143 goals so far, just shy of 3 a night. The problem is that those numbers are fighting uphill against a recent run where they have been leaking chances and goals, especially when they fall behind and the game gets stretched out. Flyers fans know that feeling too well right now, that sense that their team is one bad penalty or one defensive lapse away from the whole structure wobbling. So what you are really weighing here is a rested home favorite with a healthy primary goalie, a fully intact top-scoring line, and the comfort of altitude and last change against a road underdog that just exerted a ton of energy to stop a skid, is missing its wins leader in net, and is still down multiple regulars on defense and up front. The market has already nudged toward Utah on that equation, and nothing in the latest rosters or injury reports contradicts that lean. That does not mean the result is guaranteed. It never does. It only means the probabilities line up a little more clearly on one side for this specific night. As our first pick for this matchup, the Utah Mammoth money line is our full game side pick. Most books are hanging a total number at 5.5, and in a lot of spots the overside is treated like the favorite, which tells you the market expects offense to show up unless the goalies absolutely steal the show. That is already a bit of a clue, because a flat 5.5 with the overshaded is basically the market hinting that 6 goals is a very realistic landing zone. The season-long baseline points in the same direction. Utah have those 153 goals in 49 games, hovering just over 3.1 per night. Philadelphia sit at 143 goals in their 48 games, just under 3 per game. Put those together and you land in that low 6 range before you even layer in game script, special teams, or the current defensive wobble on one side. So if you are someone who likes to start with the true talent number, this one does not exactly scream old-school 2-to-1 grinder on paper. Form-wise, the recent scoring patterns are hard to miss, especially for the Flyers. Their last 10 games have featured them averaging about 2.5 scored but giving up close to 4. And there has been a steady run of games where the opponent has hit 5 or more. That is not random noise. That is what happens when your penalty kill has been under strain, your defensive health is not great, and your goaltending carousel is spinning a little faster than you would like. And remember, their recent low-scoring win in Vegas came with the Golden Knights missing some key pieces and still firing plenty of shots. If that game had even a slightly less sharp performance from Ersson, the box score would look a lot louder. On the Utah side, their last 10 have them sitting in that 7 wins, 2 losses, 1 overtime loss range, with roughly 3.7 goals scored per game and only about 2.3 allowed. The important piece for the total is the scoring rate, not the record. At home during this stretch, they have been comfortable winning 4-2, 6-1, 6-3 types of games. They do not mind trading chances when their attack is humming, and in this building their confidence to push for that extra goal instead of sitting back on too often shows up on the shot clock. There is also the very human piece, which numbers never totally capture. When a team like Utah has found its shooting touch at home, there is a tendency to keep the foot down a bit longer than the textbook would suggest, especially with a fan base that is still relatively new to the NHL and loves fireworks. On the other bench, a team like Philadelphia, already under pressure from a rough January, is more likely to chase if they fall behind. Chasing usually means stretching shifts, taking chances through the neutral zone, and being willing to trade a rush against for a rush for, which is exactly how games creep past 5 goals without feeling especially wild. The goaltending context nudges things as well. Utah should be rolling with Vejmelka, who is active and healthy, but even with his solid numbers, he is not a lock everything down to 2 or fewer every night guy. He gives you quality more often than not, but the style Utah play in front of him still invites some looks the other way. On the Flyers side, with Vladar on injured reserve and Ersson carrying extra workload, you have a situation where fatigue and confidence are both variables. He is coming off a great outing in Vegas, but his season line tells you he has had more rough nights than easy ones, and asking for back-to-back road gems in the West is a big request. Special teams can quietly decide these totals, and here the setup again leans more toward scoring than suffocation. Philadelphia's penalty kill finally stabilized a bit in that Vegas game, but the bigger sample in this recent slump shows them giving up a string of power play goals to opponents with far less aggressive top units than Utah can throw over the boards. Utah's power play is not perfect, but with Keller, Schmaltz, Genther, and Krause all confirmed available and in their usual roles, you have a first unit that can punish even a single sloppy clear. All it takes is one undisciplined stretch from the Flyers in the second period, and this total can move from quiet to noisy in 5 minutes of real time. So you put all of that together, and you get a picture of a game where both teams carry enough offensive talent, both have recent tendencies that tilt toward higher scoring environments, and the injury situation, especially in the Philadelphia crease and on their blue line, makes long stretches of mistake-free defense less likely. Could the goalies stand on their heads and make this look like a chess match? Of course, but based on current season scoring rates, recent trends, confirmed rosters, and who is actually available tonight, the more reasonable expectation is a game that has a very good chance of clearing that mid-line rather than tucking underneath it quietly. That is a probability statement, not a promise, and as always it assumes no surprise scratches or last-minute goaltending changes. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Anaheim Ducks versus Colorado Avalanche. On paper, this matchup looks like it was coded in easy mode for Colorado. You have a team with a monster record, sitting at something like 34-5-8 overall and a ridiculous 20-1-3 at home. So right away the public story is, this one is already decided. The money line reflects that, with Colorado sitting around -300 and Anaheim up in that chunky plus range that usually screams long shot, which roughly bakes in a 3 in 4 chance for the home favorite if prices were perfectly sharp. But betting is not about crowning the most likely winner. It is about asking whether the price tag matches reality or if the market got a little starstruck by the home juggernaut. Anaheim walks into this thing with a record in the mid-pack range, roughly 25-21-3, so they are not some basement dweller just grateful to be on the same ice. They went through that ugly 9-game skid where they won almost nothing and bled close to 5 goals a night, which looked like a team in free fall. Then, almost like someone flipped a switch, they ripped off 4 straight wins. And here is the key part. They chopped those goals against down to under 2 per game while scoring at about the same rate as before. That is the kind of pattern that hints at structure tightening up and habits getting cleaner, not just a random streak of puck luck. Honestly, that kind of shift is exactly what you want to see when you are wondering whether a dog can hang around against a giant. Colorado, for all the justified hype, has not been completely flawless either. They finally took a regulation loss at home and had a small wobble where they dropped a handful of games in a short stretch before steadying themselves again. When a team is sitting top of the charts in goals scored and goals allowed, and doing it with style, odds makers and casual money tend to bake every bit of that dominance into the line, then add a little tax just because everyone wants action on the fun side. You see it in every sport. The glamour team is a bit like the hot tech stock. The story is so good that sometimes the price runs ahead of the actual edge. On top of that, both benches are walking into this with some injury noise in the background. Anaheim is down key scoring pieces, the guys who usually drive a good chunk of their offense, which naturally pushes them toward a more disciplined, grind-heavy approach. Colorado is missing important veterans in leadership spots and on the back end, which does not erase their talent, but does chip away at that smooth, automatic feel everyone expects. So the gap is still real, the favorite is still the favorite, but the number on the board is not just about talent, it is also about perception and narrative. The real question for a spread is whether Anaheim can drag this into their kind of night often enough to matter. They have already shown this season that when they pull their game into a dull, 5 skaters moving together kind of style, they can force better teams to play a coin flip instead of a track meet. If they can slow the rhythm, keep the scoreboard respectable, and avoid those brutal Avalanche periods where 3 goals land in 5 minutes, that big underdog price suddenly looks less like charity and more like a calculated gamble on variance. Here is the thing, that is not a claim that Colorado forgot how to play. It is simply a statement that the spread is big, the market love is loud, and the underdog has just enough structure and recent form to make this one interesting from a numbers point of view. As our first pick for this matchup, the Anaheim Ducks to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. We are looking at a total number set at 6.5, with the over juiced into that heavier price range and the under sitting there with the more attractive return, which is the market's way of yelling, expect goals, a lot of them. On paper, that story checks out. You have one of the most explosive offenses in the league playing at altitude, a building where goals often come in flurries, and a visiting team that has been involved in its share of wild scorelines. It sounds like a recipe for yet another 7 or 8 goal night, the kind of game that shows up on highlight reels and same-game parlays. Colorado's season profile fits that script at first glance. They score around 4 goals a night, give or take, and allow a little over 2, which is a scary combination. They fire a ton of pucks, tilt the ice for long stretches, and when you just scroll through box scores, it feels like you are staring at arcade mode hockey. Anaheim, zoomed out, lands somewhere a bit over 3 goals scored and roughly 3.5 or so allowed per game, which again points you straight at that 6-goal neighborhood before you even think about anything else. If you stop there, it is easy to understand why the over is carrying that heavier price. But those full season numbers are like averaging 2 completely different movies. During that 9-game nightmare, Anaheim was giving up close to 5 goals a night, which created all kinds of inflated totals that still hang in the stats. In the recent 4-game winning streak, they kept opponents under 2 a game while scoring at about their usual pace. Same logo, same jerseys, very different feel. That is the part people sometimes miss when they just look at season-long charts on their phones. The current version of the Ducks is playing a calmer, more responsible style, especially without those primary scoring threats available. Missing multiple top offensive pieces is not just a note on a report, it changes the way a team attacks. Entries get simpler, cross-ice plays get rarer, and you see more chip it in, get it back, and live to see the next shift hockey. That kind of approach can still produce goals, but it usually shaves off some of the chaos that drives totals into the 7 and 8 range. It quietly nudges games toward a lower event profile, even if it does not feel dramatic in real time. On the other side, Colorado at home can score in bunches, but their defensive numbers in that building tell an equally strong story. They have allowed a bit over 50 goals across roughly 24 home dates, so around 2 per game, which is a serious clampdown on visiting offenses. In simple terms, this is a building that can smother a short-handed opponent once the home team settles into its structure. We saw a version of that in their last meeting in Denver, which finished 4-1, a comfortable win on the surface that still snuck in under the same 6.5 mark. Now, the trend people will point to is that Colorado home games and Anaheim road games have thrown up plenty of high totals recently, and that is a real, documented pattern. Those strings of 7 and 8 goal nights are part of why this number is as high as it is and why the over is carrying the premium. But trends like that often become the exact spots where totals get nudged just a little too far, especially when the favorite has a reputation for fireworks and the underdog used to bleed chances. If the game shapes up more like the recent, tighter version of Anaheim and the methodical, controlled defensive version of Colorado, then suddenly 6.5 looks quite tall. Picture a night where the early minutes are a bit cautious, where both teams feel each other out instead of trading odd man rushes right away. Goals can still come, they almost always do in this league, but if the scoring is spaced out and the third period settles into a more conservative rhythm, the path to finishing under that big number is not as wild as the headline suggests. Honestly, it is less about rooting for a snooze fest and more about recognizing that the context, the injuries, and the recent stylistic shifts support a lower scoring script more often than the market seems to think. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. New York Islanders versus Seattle Kraken. This matchup in Seattle has that late-night, slightly weird energy written all over it. You have an Islanders group that has quietly turned a long road trip into something like a character test, stringing together enough positive results to feel confident without getting cocky. Their record reflects it, sitting at around 27-17-5, which is not just numbers on a screen. It is proof they know how to handle travel, back-to-backs, and all the small annoyances that come with living out of hotel rooms for weeks. What makes them interesting here is not only results, but how they are getting them. They are winning ugly, grinding out low-margin games, stealing points with late pushes, and leaning on a defensive structure that survives even when the lineup is not fully healthy. Honestly, that is the kind of profile that tends to travel well. You can feel it in the way they close periods, how quickly they collapse to the slot when things get messy, and how comfortable they seem when the crowd is roaring for the other team. There is also that calm in net that changes how everyone in front skates. When you have a starter who can erase a couple of mistakes each night, defenders play a touch more assertive, and forwards can stretch a little higher in transition. The Islanders have that, and you see it in their body language after goals against. They do not panic, they reset. That mindset, plus a penalty kill that usually holds up under pressure, gives them a nice safety blanket in tight road environments. Seattle, on the other hand, sits around 21-18-9, and they feel like a team stuck between two moods. They had that hot stretch earlier, looked like they had found something, then suddenly they are fighting through a skid, wondering where the rhythm went. Climate Pledge Arena can be a tough place for visitors, but lately it has felt like the Kraken are working twice as hard just to keep themselves in games, chasing early goals against and trying to claw back instead of dictating the pace. Stylistically, they still bring a heavy forecheck, responsible centers, and defensemen who like to jump at the right moments. The issue is consistency. Some nights the puck support is crisp and they look like a playoff team. Other nights, they struggle to break the puck out cleanly and spend too much time hemmed in their own zone. Against a structured opponent that already enjoys dragging games into the mud, that volatility can be a real problem. The coaching angles matter too. New York leans into a simple, repeatable template, protect the middle, win battles on the walls, and let their top skill guys pick spots rather than forcing plays every shift. Seattle often needs a bit more from everyone just to generate the same quality looks, which is exhausting over 60 minutes. When you line it all up, travel fatigue, home energy, form, goaltending, and overall stability, one side just feels a little more trustworthy in the quiet, late stages of a close game. As our first pick for this matchup, the New York Islanders money line is our full game side pick. Now, shifting over to the scoring angle, this game has a very different personality. If you remember their last meeting, it turned into that rare kind of goalie duel where nobody could buy a goal, a true old-school rock fight that stayed scoreless through regulation and overtime. That type of game sticks in people's minds, and it is easy to assume the rematch will look exactly the same. But hockey does not really work like reruns on Netflix. The script is almost never identical twice in a row. Both of these teams, as they are playing now, tend to land right around that middle range in total scoring. They are not pure track meet teams, but they are not unwatchable defensive slogs either. New York concedes relatively few goals thanks to their structure and goaltending, but they have been finding ways to bump their own goal totals with timely offense and opportunistic rush chances. Seattle, for all their uneven form, still finds bursts of offense, especially at home when the building wakes up and they string together aggressive shifts. If you look at recent stretches for each side, you see a pattern that leans more toward chaos than that old 0-0 memory suggests. Kraken games have started to open up with more odd man rushes, more defensive breakdowns, and more third-period swings when they are chasing the game. Islanders games, too, have mixed in comfortable shutouts with wild, multi-goal affairs where both teams trade punches. It is not purely mathematical, but you can feel that these are not two teams locked into low-scoring identities every single night. Special teams also add gasoline to the scoring conversation. Seattle's power play has enough creativity to punish even minor lapses, and when they get rolling at home, the puck movement can stretch penalty killers thin. New York's man advantage has not always been pretty on the stat sheet, yet in recent weeks it has found ways to cash in at key moments, especially when their puck movement speeds up and they create traffic at the net. Combine that with a penalty kill on the Kraken side that has had plenty of wobbly moments, and you start to see how a game that begins tight can slowly loosen up, especially if whistles early on set a tone. Then there is the late-game script we see so often now. If one side is trailing by a goal, you get that extended empty net sequence, long changes, frantic pinches from defensemen, and broken plays that can easily turn a one-goal game into a 2 or even 3-goal final. Over a full season, those chaotic endings quietly push a lot of totals one way. With this matchup, where neither team is fully content to sit back if they fall behind, the last 5 minutes could easily end up being the loudest 5 minutes of the entire night. The posted number for this one sits at that familiar mid-range spot, the kind that invites debate. Some will remember the last time these two met and feel pulled toward another tight, grinding game. Others will look at the recent form, the special teams' vulnerabilities, and the growing tendency for both sides to trade chances and think we might be in for a more open scoreboard this time. When you add it all together, tempo swings, home ice energy, special teams volatility, and modern empty net strategy, the picture tilts toward a game that has a real chance to cross that number rather than tiptoe beneath it. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.